In a crowded airport full of noise, announcements, and rushing strangers, one little girl was screaming for help without making a sound. She couldn't run. She couldn't cry. She couldn't say a single word. So instead, she trusted a dog, one silent signal, one trembling hand, and a choice that would decide her life forever. What that police dog did next didn't just stop a crime. It exposed a truth that shocked everyone watching. Broken heart paw prints. Stay with this story till the end, because some heroes don't speak, they sense. Backhand Index Boing writes subscribe now for powerful true stories that remind us hope can appear when we least expect it. JFK Airport was alive in the way it always was. Footsteps echoing against polished floors, rolling suitcases humming past, voices overlapping in a dozen different languages. Families hurried. Travelers stared at their phones. Goodbyes and reunions happened quietly, everywhere at once. Officer Ryan Keller moved through it all with practiced calm. At his side walked Shadow, a full-grown German shepherd with sharp eyes and a disciplined stride. They had patrolled this terminal together so many times that Ryan could almost do it with his eyes closed. Same route, same smells, same harmless chaos. Nothing ever happened here. That was the comfort of routine. Shadow's leash hung loose in Ryan's hand. The dog was relaxed, alert but unbothered, until he wasn't. Without a command, without a sound, Shadow stopped. Not a pause, not curiosity. Stillness. His body stiffened, as if a switch had been flipped deep inside him. Ears forward, muscles tight. His breathing changed, slow, focused. His eyes locked on something ahead. Ryan felt it instantly. "Shadow," he murmured, instinctively tightening his grip. The dog didn't look at him. Ryan followed Shadow's gaze through the moving crowd. A little girl stood near a departure gate, her small hand wrapped around a woman's wrist. The woman was well-dressed, calm, scrolling through her phone. Nothing about her screamed danger. Nothing about the child stood out either. She wore a pale blue jacket, sneakers too big for her feet, hair neatly tied back. At first glance, she looked normal, but Shadow didn't move. The girl did. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, her eyes lifted, not to Ryan, not to the signs overhead. To Shadow. Their eyes met. The girl didn't cry, didn't pull away, didn't say a word, but something passed between them. Her fingers tightened around the woman's wrist, then loosened. Her shoulders sank, just a little, as if she'd been holding her breath for too long. And for the briefest second, her free hand shifted behind her leg. It wasn't a wave. It wasn't a gesture anyone would notice. But Shadow did. A low sound vibrated in his chest. Not a growl, not a bark. A warning only Ryan had ever heard before. Ryan's heart rate spiked. He had trusted Shadow with his life before. And Shadow had never been wrong. The terminal kept moving. People kept walking. But in that crowded, ordinary place, Ryan knew something was very wrong. Because Shadow wasn't reacting to fear. He was responding to a signal. The girl's free hand trembled. Not enough for most people to notice. In a place like JFK, trembling hands were everywhere. Nervous flyers, tired parents, anxious travelers. Fear blended into background here. But Shadow noticed. The small hand pressed flat against the back of the woman's coat. Not grabbing, not pushing, pressing. It lingered there for a beat too long, then slid away and pressed again. Slow, deliberate, almost practiced. Not waving, not clinging. Signaling. The girl's shoulders were hunched forward, as if she were trying to disappear inside her jacket. Her chin stayed down, eyes lowered, lashes hiding the fear she couldn't afford to show openly. Her lips were sealed tight, drawn into a thin line that looked less like obedience and more like survival. Fear lived in her eyes. Not loud fear, quiet fear, the kind that learns early how dangerous attention can be. Shadow took one step forward. Ryan felt the tension run up the leash like an electric current. "Easy," he whispered, though his voice betrayed him. The girl glanced up then, just for a second. Her eyes met Shadow's. That look wasn't curiosity. It was a plea. Not desperate, not panicked, calculated. The kind of look that asked a single question. Do you understand me? Ryan's stomach dropped. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't a child simply afraid of dogs. This was a child begging to be seen. Shadow's ears tilted forward, locking in, his body angled slightly toward the girl, creating distance between her and the woman without stepping closer. A protective posture Ryan had seen only once before, during a training simulation involving a missing child. Shadow had never forgotten that drill. The woman noticed the dog then. Her fingers tightened around the girl's wrist, just a little too tight. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, her voice smooth, rehearsed. Calm in the way people sound when they believe calm is armor. Ryan met her eyes. "Routine patrol," he said evenly. "Shadow reacts sometimes." "Crowds." The woman smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "Well, we're late for our flight," she replied, tugging the girl closer. "Come on." The girl stumbled half a step, not because she wasn't paying attention, but because she hadn't expected to be pulled. Her other hand moved again. This time it was faster. Her fingers curled inward, then opened, curled, opened, pressed flat against the coat again. Shadow let out a low whine, not loud enough to draw attention, loud enough for Ryan to hear. Ryan's pulse thudded in his ears. Every instinct he had was screaming, but instinct alone wasn't enough. Airports ran on rules. Accusations needed cause. And children were complicated. "Ma'am," Ryan said, taking a small step closer, "is this your daughter?" The girl's head snapped up. Her eyes widened. The woman answered too quickly. "Yes, of course." Shadow sat. That alone was wrong. Shadow was trained to sit on command, or when he detected something specific. Sitting meant alert without aggression. It meant confirm. Ryan crouched slightly, bringing himself closer to the girl's level without looming. "Hey there," he said gently. "What's your name?" The girl swallowed. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. The woman laughed lightly. "She's shy," she said. "Always has been." The girl's fingers tightened again, this time digging into the fabric of the coat. Her knuckles turned white. Shadow stood. He stepped forward, placing himself directly between the girl and the woman. The leash went taut. Gasps rippled nearby. A few people slowed, sensing tension they couldn't explain. "Officer," the woman said sharply now, "control your dog." Ryan didn't take his eyes off the girl. "Shadow," he commanded quietly. The dog didn't move, because he wasn't looking at the woman. He was looking at the child. The girl's breathing was shallow. Her eyes flicked from Shadow to Ryan, then to the exit sign glowing above the terminal doors. Then she did something that made Ryan's blood run cold. She lifted her hand, slowly, carefully, and pressed her palm against her own chest. Twice. Then she pointed, not outward, inward, to herself. Shadow barked. Once. Sharp. Controlled. Final. The sound cut through the terminal like glass breaking. People turned. Phones lowered. Conversation stopped. Ryan straightened. "Ma'am," he said, his voice firm now, carrying authority that left no room for argument, "I need you to release the child's wrist." The woman's smile vanished. "What is this?" she snapped. "You have no right." "Now." Shadow took another step forward. The girl's grip broke free. She moved instantly. 3 steps forward, straight to Shadow, burying her face into the thick fur of his chest like she had practiced this moment in her mind 1,000 times. Her small hands clutched his harness. "I did it," she whispered, so softly only Ryan heard. "I did it like they told me." Ryan's chest tightened. He knelt beside her, one hand steady on Shadow's back. "You did perfect," he said quietly. "You're safe now." Behind them, security was already moving, and for the first time since she had entered that terminal, the girl began to cry, not loudly, not wildly, but with relief, because someone had finally understood her silent signal. Shadow moved forward with quiet urgency, not lunging, not panicking, pulling the leash just enough to say, "Follow me." Ryan didn't hesitate. He adjusted his grip and let Shadow lead, weaving through the unaware crowd. Around them, the terminal continued its restless rhythm, boarding calls echoing, suitcases rolling, children laughing, people rushing toward destinations that mattered only to them. No one noticed the tension moving through their midst. Ahead, the woman walked faster now, her posture stiff. Her heels struck the floor with purpose. The little girl struggled to keep pace, her short steps nearly turning into a run. The woman never looked back. Her grip on the girl's wrist tightened. Ryan saw it clearly this time. The skin pulling, the child's arm stretched just a fraction too far. Not the grip of a protective parent, the grip of ownership. Shadow let out a low, continuous sound, almost a hum, vibrating through his chest. It wasn't fear. It wasn't aggression. It was certainty. They approached the security checkpoint. The woman slowed, smoothed her coat, and reached into her bag. In seconds, the tension vanished from her face, replaced by a polite smile. She bent slightly toward the girl, her voice soft but edged with steel. "Stand straight," she murmured. "Be good." The girl nodded quickly, too quickly. Ryan watched her shoulders rise and fall in shallow breaths. Her eyes stayed down, fixed on the floor, as if eye contact itself was dangerous. Documents were handed over. A passport, a boarding pass. The TSA agent glanced at them, barely pausing. Everything looked right. Everything was in order. The woman smiled again. "We're already late," she said lightly. "Understood," the agent replied, motioning them forward. Something felt wrong. Not in a way Ryan could point on a form or in a report, but in the way his instincts twisted deep in his gut. He'd learned to listen to that feeling years ago, back when ignoring it had cost him sleep, and names he still remembered. Shadow stopped. Abruptly, the leash snapped tight. "Shadow," Ryan warned softly. The dog didn't move. The woman noticed this time. Annoyance flickered across her face. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her voice sharp beneath the smile. Ryan opened his mouth to answer, and Shadow barked. One sharp sound. Clear, commanding. It cut through the terminal like a blade. Conversations died mid-sentence. A child dropped a toy. Heads turned. Even the departure board seemed to hum louder in the sudden silence. The woman froze. The girl didn't. She turned her head slowly, carefully, as if moving too fast might break something fragile. Her eyes locked onto Ryan's. Her lips moved. No sound came out, but Ryan read them perfectly. "Help me." His heart slammed against his ribs. "Ma'am," Ryan said, his voice steady but unyielding. "Step aside." The woman's hand tightened reflexively. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "My daughter is afraid of dogs. You're upsetting her." Shadow stepped forward again. Protective, uncompromising. The girl flinched, not away from the dog, but away from the woman. That was all Ryan needed. "Release her," he said. Now. Two airport security officers were already moving closer, drawn by the bark and the growing tension. The TSA agent hesitated, eyes flicking between the dog, the officer, and the child. The woman laughed nervously. "You can't be serious. We have a flight." Shadow sat. Hard. Alert posture. Final warning. The girl did something unexpected. She shook her head. Once. Then again. And finally, with a courage that didn't belong to someone so small, she pulled her arm free and stepped back. Straight toward Shadow. The woman's composure cracked. "Hey!" she hissed, reaching for the girl again. Ryan moved faster. He stepped between them, his body a barrier. "That's enough." The girl pressed into Shadow's side, gripping his harness with both hands. The dog leaned down instinctively, his presence steady and grounding. His tail didn't wag. His eyes never left the woman. Security closed in. "Ma'am," one of the officers said, "we need you to come with us." The woman's face drained of color. "This is insane," she protested. "You're all making a mistake." The girl looked up at Ryan, tears finally spilling over. "They told me not to talk," she whispered. "They said no one would believe me." Ryan crouched down to her level, his voice gentle. "You did exactly what you were supposed to do." She sniffed. "I remembered. The hand thing." Ryan's breath caught. "Who taught you that?" The girl glanced at Shadow, then back at Ryan. "A police dog," she said softly. "At my school. They said if I was ever scared to trust a dog." Ryan swallowed hard, because she had. The woman was escorted away, her protest growing louder, her story unraveling with every step. Documents were rechecked. Names were run. Red flags surfaced, quickly once someone bothered to look. The crowd slowly returned to motion, the moment already fading into another airport story people would forget by the time they boarded their flights. But for Ryan, everything had changed. He wrapped his jacket gently around the girl's shoulders. "What's your name?" he asked again. This time, she answered, "Lily." Shadow nudged her hand with his nose. She smiled for the first time. Later, much later, Ryan would learn the full truth. That the woman wasn't her mother. That the documents were forged. That Lily had been moved before and would have disappeared forever if she hadn't remembered one simple lesson. If you can't speak, signal. In that moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was that a little girl trusted an instinct she didn't fully understand. That a police dog listened when no one else could. And that in the middle of the busiest airport in the world, silence had spoken louder than screams. The woman snapped. Her calm facade shattered the moment security tightened the circle around her. "These are my children," she shouted, her voice sharp and defensive, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "You have no right to do this." She's confused. She's scared. Look what you're doing to her. Her hand shot out again, fingers closing around the girl's wrist. Hard. The girl gasped. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. Her body flinched on instinct, shoulders jerking inward, knees buckling just slightly as pain flashed across her face. Years of training told Ryan everything he needed to know. That wasn't discipline. That was control. Shadow growled. Low, protective, unafraid. The sound rolled from deep in his chest, vibrating through the floor. It wasn't the growl of aggression. It was a warning. One that said this ends now. The woman froze. Her eyes flicked to the dog, then to Ryan. For the first time, fear leaked through her anger. Ryan stepped forward, his presence firm, immovable. "Ma'am," he said, his voice steady but iron hard, "you need to release the child. Now. And you need to come with us." "This is harassment," she screamed. "You can't just take children away because a dog barked." Shadow took one deliberate step closer. The girl cried out softly and twisted her arm free, stumbling backward into Ryan's leg. He placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "It's okay," he murmured. "You're safe." Security officers closed in fully now, forming a barrier between the woman and the children. One officer gently guided the girl behind Ryan. Another stood ready, hand hovering near his radio. The woman's breathing became erratic. Her story began to change, small shifts at first. "I adopted them." "No, my sister is their mother. She's just tired. She's always dramatic." Each sentence contradicted the last. Each lie collapsed faster than the one before it. "Ma'am," the head of airport security said calmly, "we're escorting you to a private room for questioning." "I'm not going anywhere," she screamed, trying to push past him. That's when Shadow barked again. One short, commanding sound. Final. The woman stopped fighting. Not because of the officers. Because of the dog. Behind closed doors, the air felt different. The noise of the terminal faded into a distant hum as the door shut. The sterile room smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. A table. A few chairs. Fluorescent lights that buzzed softly overhead. The woman sat rigidly, arms crossed, jaw clenched so tight her teeth ground audibly. Across the room, the girl sat beside Ryan, wrapped in his jacket. Shadow lay at her feet, his body angled toward her protectively, eyes never leaving the woman. Ryan crouched in front of the girl, lowering himself to her level. "You're not in trouble," he said gently. "I promise. But I need you to tell us the truth." Her hand shook in her lap. She swallowed. The silence stretched. Then, in a voice so small it barely seemed possible it could carry so much weight, she whispered, "She's not my mother." The words hit the room like a crack of thunder. The woman surged to her feet. "That's a lie," she screamed. "She's confused. She's been coached." "Sit down," security barked. The woman collapsed back into the chair, her face pale, eyes darting. Ryan didn't rush the girl. He nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "Thank you for telling me. Can you tell me your real name?" The girl hesitated, then whispered it. It wasn't a name on the passport. A technician stepped in quietly, collecting the documents that had already been flagged. Passports, birth certificates, consent forms. They didn't match. Dates were off. Names were inconsistent. Photos had been altered, subtly but poorly. The woman's story began to crumble under even the lightest scrutiny. "Where were you born?" An officer asked the woman. She hesitated. "What's her birthday?" Another pause. The girl looked up at Ryan, tears spilling freely now. "She told me not to talk," she whispered. "She said if I did, my brother would disappear." Ryan's chest tightened. "Your brother?" The girl nodded. "He's with another lady. They said if I was good, I'd see him again." Every adult in the room felt it, the sickening realization settling heavy in their stomachs. This wasn't one child. This was a system. The woman's anger finally gave way to desperation. "You don't understand," she muttered. "I was just transporting them. I didn't hurt anyone." Ryan stood slowly. "Transporting children is hurting them," he said quietly. The woman said nothing. Authorities arrived swiftly after that. Federal agents, Child Protective Services, specialists trained to handle cases like this. Phones rang. Databases were checked. Faces hardened as patterns emerged. The woman wasn't a mother. She was a courier, part of a trafficking ring that moved children through busy airports using forged documents and rehearsed stories, counting on crowds and chaos to keep everyone distracted. And it had worked. Until today. The girl was moved to a quieter room, wrapped in a blanket now, a cup of warm juice trembling in her hands. A social worker sat beside her, speaking softly, patiently. Shadow followed. He laid down at her feet again, close enough that she could feel his warmth. Every time her breathing hitched, he shifted just slightly, reminding her she wasn't alone. Ryan watched from the doorway. He'd seen criminals cry. He'd seen victims scream. But the quiet strength of this child, this small, terrified girl who had found a way to ask for help without making a sound, hit him harder than anything he'd faced in uniform. She had trusted a lesson. She had trusted a dog. And that trust had fought back against something far bigger than her. Hours later, as the sun dipped low beyond the airport windows, confirmation came in. The trafficking ring had been operating for years. Multiple arrests were already underway. Other children were being located. Lives, real lives, were being pulled back from the edge of disappearance. Ryan knelt beside the girl one last time before she was taken to a safe place. "You were incredibly brave," he told her. She looked down at Shadow, her fingers gently threading through his fur. "He listened," she said simply. Ryan smiled, emotion tightening his throat. "Yes," he said, "he did." As they walked away, Shadow glanced back once, at the room, at the closed door, at the light it had finally lost. And for the first time since that silent signal in the terminal, the dog relaxed, because the truth had won, and a little girl had been heard, without ever needing to scream. The woman was led away in handcuffs. Her footsteps echoed briefly down the corridor, sharp and hollow, until they disappeared behind a closing door. The shouting, the arguing, the tension that had clung to the air for hours went with her. The chaos faded. The room felt lighter, quieter, in a way that was almost unfamiliar. For the first time since anyone had noticed her, the little girl truly breathed. Not the shallow, careful breaths she had been taking all day. Not the controlled silence of a child who had learned that survival meant staying small. A real breath. Her shoulders rose, then slowly fell. She looked around, as if surprised that the room was still there, that no one was pulling her, that no one was demanding anything from her. Her eyes landed on Shadow. He was sitting patiently, tail resting on the floor, ears relaxed for the first time since the terminal. No alert stance, no tension, just presence. The girl knelt down. It wasn't sudden or dramatic, just a quiet decision made in her own time. She wrapped her arms around Shadow's thick fur, pressing her face into the warmth of his neck. Her small body trembled as everything she had been holding back finally found somewhere safe to land. "Thank you," she whispered. The word barely carried, but Shadow heard it. He leaned into her, steady and calm, letting her hold on as long as she needed. His tail thumped once, slow, gentle, like a heartbeat. Ryan turned away. He told himself it was to give her privacy. But the truth was his eyes burned. He had worn the badge for years. He had chased suspects, broken up fights, made arrests that earned nods of approval and paperwork full of praise. But none of that compared to what he was seeing now. A child who had survived by being invisible, finally allowed to be seen. The social worker knelt nearby, speaking softly about warm beds and clean clothes and a place where no one would ever grab her arm again. The girl listened, nodding slowly, but she didn't let go of Shadow. Not yet. Shadow stayed perfectly still. Because sometimes the most important part of the job wasn't action. It was staying. Ryan stepped closer and crouched beside them. "You're safe now," he said gently. "No one is going to hurt you." The girl lifted her head, her eyes red but clear. "I know," she said quietly. "He told me." Ryan blinked. "He did." She nodded, resting her cheek back against Shadow's fur. "When he looked at me, he wasn't angry. He wasn't scary. He just waited." Ryan swallowed hard. That was Shadow, trained to search, trained to detect, but more than anything, trained to listen. Time moved differently after that. Paperwork was signed. Calls were made. Arrangements were set in motion. The world began to turn again, slow and careful, making space for something fragile to heal. Before she was led away to safety, the girl stood and faced Shadow one last time. She placed both hands on his muzzle, looking straight into his eyes. "I didn't make a sound," she said. "But you heard me." Shadow huffed softly, warm breath brushing her fingers. Ryan clipped the leash back on, though Shadow didn't pull this time. As they walked away, Ryan looked back once. The girl was watching them go, not with fear, but with something new, trust. And in that moment, Ryan understood something he would carry with him for the rest of his career. The hero didn't need a badge. The hero didn't need applause or headlines or recognition. The hero listened, with a heart that cared, and a nose that never forgot what fear smelled like. And because of that, a little girl had her life back. In a world full of noise, it had been silence that saved her. Sometimes, help doesn't arrive with flashing lights or raised voices. Sometimes, it comes quietly, through instinct, loyalty, and the courage to trust what feels right. This little girl couldn't scream. She couldn't run. She couldn't even explain. But she wasn't invisible. In the middle of one of the loudest places in the world, she chose to believe that someone or something would notice the truth she couldn't say out loud. And Shadow did. This story reminds us that not all cries for help sound the same. Some are hidden in body language. Some are buried in silence. And some are only visible to those who are truly paying attention. It teaches us to trust intuition when something feels wrong, to slow down when everyone else is rushing, and to remember that bravery doesn't always look like fighting back. Sometimes it looks like holding on and waiting for the right moment. Heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they walk on four legs, listen without judgment, and protect without asking for anything in return. Paw Prints, Red Heart. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who believes heroes come in many forms. Subscribe for more true stories that stay with you.